What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of That Dynasty Show. Today, we are going to be playing a little do this, don't do that kind of game. Tyler and I are going to go through the sleeper ADP as of today, August 14th, and we're going to say, hey, don't draft this guy when you can get this guy 10 to 15 picks later. But before we get into it, Tyler, how are we doing today, buddy?
I'm good. I think this is a really important topic in fantasy football in general. Just trying to find the best values throughout the draft. I think that's typically how we want to construct our teams. So I think it's definitely a relevant topic, and it'll be a good one to put out there.
Yeah, and it's really easy to fall victim to the ADP, right? It's your turn to pick, and you see five guys that are there. You're trying to choose between the top five guys on the board, but they might not be the right choice, right? There's always a better choice a little bit later on. So hopefully this video will kind of help you who are watching, not you, Tyler, because you're going to be giving some advice here, hopefully. But hopefully helping out to not make those mistakes and being a slave to the ADP in those dynasty startup drafts moving forward. So, Tyler, I'll let you kick us off here. Who are you drafting and who are you not drafting at a certain spot?
Well, so to start off, this guy, he just had a legendary season, one of the best of all time. I think the best of all time in terms of fantasy production in Cooper Kupp. But I really don't like his situation moving forward. I don't think he can really improve from here. With Allen Robinson showing up, drafting Cooper Kupp at 13 is a little bit rich for me. When you can find a guy like Stefon Diggs at 29. Stefon Diggs is a guy who 3 of the last 4 years has finished in the top 10, and he is now tied to Josh Allen for the foreseeable future for the next 3 or 4 years, right? I know that Cooper Kupp is tied to Matthew Stafford, but the reality is that he has competition there, and it's kind of hard to go up when from a point where you reached the top. It's hard to go up from the top, basically, right? I think Stefon Diggs is just a much safer pick and much safer value. It's really tough to take a 28-year-old receiver for me at 13. Basically in the first round. It's just typically not really how I want to construct my team. And if I'm going to look for a vet receiver, I'd rather wait for a guy like Stefon Diggs or even another guy that I'll probably talk about later.
Yeah, I kind of like this take. As much as I like Cooper Kupp, at cost, I would take Stefon Diggs at 29 rather than Cooper Kupp at 13, probably 6 out of 7 days of the week, right? There's no denying Cooper Kupp is amazing. There's no denying that he just put up one of the best fantasy seasons of all time. But you're right. I mean, what else could you possibly expect from Cooper Kupp, right? He is not going to have over 1,900 yards again. It's probably going to be a lot more realistic to say, he'll probably be somewhere between 1,400 and 1,600 yards. And Stefon Diggs has that well within the range of possibilities, right? Worst case scenario, you're probably getting like 1,250 yards out of Diggs and 8 to 10 touchdowns. There is definitely a lot of scenarios where Diggs plays on a similar level to Cooper Kupp, right? Or maybe even better. So I like that take a lot. Again, big Cooper Kupp guy, but at 13 versus 29 for Diggs, I probably would take Diggs most of the time.
Yeah, and it comes down to combinations, right? You can look at the guys who are on the board around that Cooper Kupp range, and you see like Dak Prescott, Kyle Pitts, CMC, Javonte, CeeDee Lamb, maybe, right? Would you rather have one of those guys and Stefon Diggs, or would you rather have Cooper Kupp and like Derrick Henry or a Dalvin Cook? I'd prefer the first combination. I'd rather Diggs and one of those young running backs or young receivers than a combo of Kupp and like Derrick Henry.
Yeah, so I think that's a pretty good call. So draft Stefon Diggs at 29. Don't draft Cooper Kupp at 13. We're not saying don't go out and draft Cooper Kupp at all. There's obviously always a spot for Cooper Kupp on the roster. But Stefon Diggs is a significantly better value and does have pretty damn similar upside if we're being completely honest. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my first one here, and it's going to be for some quarterbacks. So this is a super flex format, obviously, that we're talking about here. So I'm going to go with draft Jalen Hurts at 19 overall. and this is all according to the sleeper ADP. We're not just pulling this out of our asses. But draft Jalen Hurts at 19, not Kyler Murray at 9. And, they're very similar in age. Kyler Murray is only a year older than Jalen Hurts. Kyler Murray did just get that extension, so we know that he is going to be a starter in this league for quite some time. But Jalen Hurts is too. There is this big idea that Jalen Hurts doesn't have job security, but he does. The Eagles have not done a single thing in the last 2 years that would say anything other than Jalen Hurts has some job security here. They went out, they got A.J. Brown, who coincidentally we'll be talking about a little bit later in this video. They have Devontae Smith, who they just drafted in the first round last year, and they have Dallas Goedert, who is one of the league's, top 10 tight ends. And they have a pretty decent offensive line as well, a nice little trio in the backfield. So there's a lot going on. There's a lot to like in this Eagles offense. Jalen Hurts and Kyler Murray, they both have QB1 overall upside, but I actually prefer Jalen Hurts in a 1-for-1 in a lot of situations over Kyler Murray. Not only is the cost better, but we've seen nothing but really great games out of Jalen Hurts. Like, yeah, he has like a stinker here and there, but for the most part, like he was a complete league winner last year. Kyler Murray was the opposite. He started off, set the league on fire for the first half of the season, and then he kind of pulled a Russell Wilson and dudded out and really did nothing for us in the back half of last season. So there's a lot of consistency issues with Kyler Murray. We saw that weird clause go in his contract for like 3 days that they need him to do his 4 hours of independent study each week or whatever. There's just a lot of doubt in my mind with Kyler Murray as a professional. And, even though he has that contract extension and Jalen Hurts doesn't, I would bank on Hurts seeing a contract extension in the next year or two. I will gladly take, one of those top 3 wide receivers or one of those top 3 running backs at pick 9, and then turn around and take Jalen Hurts as my QB1 at 19.
Yeah, you pretty much just took the words out of my mouth right there with that last sentence. I was really glad that you took one of like the first round quarterbacks here to talk about passing on them, because it's one of the things that we've done when we were drafting in like the middle of the round, right? And when we were mocking, turned out really well, right? Which combination would you rather have, Justin Jefferson and Jalen Hurts, or Kyler Murray, Austin Eckler? I'm going with the first one every time. Give me Justin Jefferson and give me Jalen Hurts at that cost. The risk reward, it is very risky to not go quarterback in round 1, right? We know that, but I mean, the production you're getting out of the receiver position or even early running back position, it makes it worth all the while there. You're basically subbing production into another position, right? If you don't really believe that Kyler Murray is going to give you a 5 or 6 point positional advantage week in and week out, Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase, they will. If you view them in a similar light, which I kind of do, I agree with you, Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts in a similar light. I'm going to take the combo of Justin Jefferson and Jalen Hurts every time there.
Yeah, and again, it's not that I'm completely avoiding Kyler Murray, but with what you're drafting Kyler Murray to be, right? He does have probably more passing upside than Jalen Hurts, but it's probably not by very much, right? Like Kyler Murray, he's a good passer, but he's far from the greatest passer in the league. They both have similar, upside with the legs, but I would argue that Jalen Hurts does have a higher upside with his legs, while Kyler Murray has the higher upside with his arm. So I don't know. It's kind of a give and take here, but for 10 whole spots on the ADP, I'm going to go with Jalen Hurts. I've been banging the drum for Jalen Hurts all off season. I'll double up here and say that I would rather have him as my QB1 than Kyler Murray, especially at cost. But even in 1-for-1, probably still leaning Jalen Hurts. So you can take that for what you will. But Tyler, I'll let you go ahead and give your second one here.
Absolutely. Everything you just said makes a lot of sense. I could probably, compound on top of that, but not going to beat a dead horse there. So the next one for me is going to be, don't draft J.K. Dobbins at 47. I know he's a guy who gets a lot of hate on this channel, but it's for a specific reason, right? Where you could draft a guy like Elijah Mitchell at 78. We've never seen, we kind of talked about this on our last video, but we've never really seen J.K. Dobbins show the upside that Elijah Mitchell did this past season. Elijah Mitchell is a rookie, or he was a rookie, rather. He's going into his second year, right? He might be a little bit old for a second-year guy, but he flashed a lot last year. He showed a lot when given the opportunity. And I know that it's been consistent that 49ers have just moved on from a running back each and every year. But I mean, that's baked into the price when you're drafting him at 78th overall, right? I think the risk reward there, again, well worth it for me. I'd much rather spend the 78th pick on Elijah Mitchell and the 47th on Dobbins. There's just no world where Dobbins has proven to me that he's earned that ADP over Elijah Mitchell. Elijah Mitchell on a per game basis has shown a lot more than J.K. Dobbins, a lot more pass catching upside too. But yeah, I mean, I just think that Elijah Mitchell has been incredibly disrespected. I think J.K. Dobbins has been incredibly overhyped. I think they're actually in like pretty similar situations where they have very creative offensive coordinators and head coaches that have very creative run games and are going to use them in very specific ways. And I'm just going to prefer the Mitchell side every single time they're at that cost.
Yeah, and I like that you chose these two guys because, like you said, they're very similar and in very similar situations. In a 1-for-1, I probably would take Dobbins, right? But at cost, I would take Elijah Mitchell every single time. 47 versus what was it, 60, 78 or something you said?
Yeah, 78.
78. That is a 3-round difference. That is 30 picks. That's insane. I completely agree with you. I'm taking Elijah Mitchell all the way back there as opposed to J.K. Dobbins at 47. And honestly, I'm just not drafting J.K. Dobbins at all, especially given his cost, right? Elijah Mitchell all the way back in what's that, the 6.5 or 7th round. That's a steal. He's only a year older than J.K. Dobbins. It's not even a full year. They're in very similar situations, like you alluded to. They both have quarterbacks that are going to steal a lot of groundwork. Neither one of them is particularly going to go out there and catch a ton of balls. I would say J.K. Dobbins has shown in his career, his short career, that he is more efficient than Elijah Mitchell, but it's not by leaps and bounds. It's not worth that. A little bit extra efficiency is not worth taking him 30 picks earlier. They both have a lot of both of them are going to be in run committees, right? Like J.K. Dobbins, he's going to be running with Gus Edwards. He's going to be running with Mike Davis. Elijah Mitchell, he's going to be running with Jeff Wilson, Trey Sermon, and maybe Tyrion. What's his last name? Blanken.
Price, TPP.
Yes, that guy. But either way, these are crowded backfields. They have very similar situations all around. And for the cost difference, I completely agree with you. I would take Elijah Mitchell at 78 over J.K. Dobbins at 47 any day of the week.
Yeah, and when you talk about the efficiency metrics, yeah, J.K. Dobbins is more efficient, but he's never had more than 15 touches in any game in his career. At least I'm looking back at the game logs from 2020. Yeah, he's only had 15 twice. I mean, he's just not a guy who's going to be getting the volume. He's going to need to be efficient with every single touch and score a touchdown for you in order to really be a consistent starter that you're happy with at that ADP, and I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, he only had 24 targets in a matter of 15 games, and Elijah Mitchell had 20 in 11. So not that either one of them are really jumping off the page, but that's just the thing. Neither one of them are jumping off the page. I couldn't see myself investing a late 4th-round pick in J.K. Dobbins, or any running back for that matter that's not going to go out there and catch balls. I think 78 for Elijah Mitchell, not only is that a really good spot for Elijah Mitchell, I think that is such a conservative spot for Elijah Mitchell, right? Like he could be going potentially 8 to 10 picks higher. And I think J.K. Dobbins should be going up to 15 or 20 picks lower. I think these two should be a lot more similar in ADP than they actually are. So I really like that you pointed this one out. But I'll go ahead, introduce my next two. And this has been a common topic for me personally, kind of for you as well, but more so for me because anything with Tee Higgins is so on brand. But I'm drafting Tee Higgins at 35, and I'm not drafting A.J. Brown at 25. So I know I just got done hyping up Jalen Hurts, but that's because he gets to be the one orchestrating the offense. A.J. Brown is just a puppet in that offense, right? A.J. Brown is going to be the wide receiver one to own in Philadelphia, but Jalen Hurts' fantasy damage, Jalen Hurts' real-life damage is going to be coming on the ground. Like he's a guy that's going to go out there, have probably 700 rushing yards minimum on the year. And I would say maybe if he's lucky, 3,800 to 4,000 passing yards. That does not leave a lot of room for A.J. Brown because he's got A.J. Brown, he's got Devontae Smith, he's got Dallas Goedert, he's got Kenny Gainwell. I'd like to see Miles Sanders catch a pass or two, but that probably won't happen. And there's a slew of, 2 or 3 depth receivers that the Eagles have that are going to demand theirs too. So A.J. Brown's ceiling, like best case scenario, he's probably seeing 1,200 yards and maybe 8 or 9 touchdowns, which is still pretty damn good, right? Like I would be very happy to see that, but that's a ceiling projection. Last year, Devontae Smith with no competition. Granted, Devontae Smith is not as good as A.J. Brown, but with no competition, he couldn't even put up 1,000 yards as Jalen Hurts is number 1 wide receiver. We're adding more competition to the mix. Like what makes us think that A.J. Brown is going to be that 1,200-yard receiver? I couldn't even guarantee that he'll see 1,000 yards this year. With Tee Higgins, I can guarantee that he'll see 1,000 yards, right? We've already seen him in the crowded offense. Joe Burrow is slinging it around for 4,500 plus yards every year from here on out. I think that's very easy to project. Jamar Chase is going to be the wide receiver 1. He's going to take away all the pressure from Tee Higgins. And Tee Higgins has back-to-back. He's put up his first 2 years. He's played 28 games. He is 1 yard short, 1 receiving yard short of having 2,000 yards total over the first 2 years of his career. And that first year, he only had Joe Burrow for 6 or 7 games before he was dealing with backups on backups. So Tee Higgins is just supremely talented. Not that A.J. Brown isn't, but Tee Higgins is in a much better situation. He is 10 spots cheaper than A.J. Brown. And over the first 30 games, so Tee Higgins has played 28, A.J. Brown has played 30. So if we use Tee Higgins's games, his 28 games, and project it into a 30-game projection, he only has 5 less points than A.J. Brown over the first 2 years of his career. Like, that's pretty damn similar production. I like Higgins's situation more. I like his price more. I'm going Tee Higgins at 35, not A.J. Brown at 25.
Yeah, I'm also completely with you here. So far we are batting 1,000. That
is rare on this channel, by the way. That is so rare.
Big time, right? I mean, I guess maybe we've just gotten in each other's heads so much that we're starting to agree. I don't know. I hope that's not the case, right? But when I look at that video we did a little while ago about quarterback receiver production, right? Jalen Hurts is at the very bottom. The only one who's underneath him is Justin Fields. He only puts up 45 fantasy points a game for his receivers. At least last year he did, right? Not a lot. Not a lot at all. Especially when you compare it to Joe Burrow, who's putting up 65. And A.J. Brown is going from Ryan Tannehill, who put up 50, which is very middle of the pack, was like 20th, right? 20th in the league. So, I mean, when you look at their situations, A.J. Brown, he has that competition in Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith is very talented. I believe he was almost 1,000-yard receiver last year. If not,
yeah,
he was
like 990 or something.
Yeah,
super close like that.
Yeah, he was like really close, right? But yeah, and when it comes to A.J. Brown going 10 picks ahead, I'm not buying it, We've seen Tee Higgins produce even with Jamar Chase ahead of him. We've seen him be a top 20 receiver. And he didn't even get to play a full season last year, right? He missed 2 games. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one. 10 picks later, I'm going Tee Higgins. I have Tee Higgins above A.J. Brown in my rankings pretty significantly. And yeah, I'm about that all day. I'm pretty off of A.J. Brown at the cost, right? I mean, like you said, Jalen Hurts is good as your quarterback for your fantasy team. He's not good as your fantasy wide receivers quarterback, right? Jalen Hurts, a lot of his upside is with the rushing aspect of things. So it doesn't necessarily benefit his receivers. But yeah, Tee Higgins in a better offense with a better quarterback, probably every bit as good of a receiver as A.J. Brown. So yeah, give me him at a later pick.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Like, I didn't even get to bring that up. I'm glad you brought up Ryan Tannehill. You look at A.J. Brown's situation in the last 2 years, it was so much better than it is right now from a fantasy perspective. Who is he competing with for targets the last 2 years? You know what I mean? Like, Tennessee has had really no one to throw the ball to outside of A.J. Brown. It's either been lob it up to A.J. Brown or hand it off to Derrick Henry. He is going to be in a very similar situation because well, kind of. He's in a similar situation because Ryan Tannehill, he's not an amazing passer, right? It was run first offense. Philly, with Jalen Hurts' legs, with the trio of running backs that they have, I would consider it at least a fairly evenly split offense, right? Probably run first in the past, probably more evenly split moving forward. But AJ Brown has never had target competition. All of the numbers that we have for him is him being a bona fide wide receiver one from like day one of his career. Tee Higgins, his situation hasn't really changed too much in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, it was no Joe Burrow and no Jamar Chase. Bring both of those guys in, you could argue that made his situation even better because he's not facing top corner coverage, and Joe Burrow is obviously a significantly better quarterback than Joe Schmo, who they had in there before. So I don't know. At 35, I think Tee Higgins is one of the best values in startup drafts right now, and 25 is just too rich for my blood for AJ Brown. But I'll stop talking about Tee Higgins and AJ Brown. I talk about them. I talk about both of these guys a lot in videos, so I had to throw them in here. But Tyler, I'll let you go ahead with your third, this, not that.
Well, it feels like they're significant this offseason, right? AJ Brown and Tee Higgins. Right? It feels like they're kind of about to make a leap one way or the other, right? So it makes sense to be talking about them. But the next one for me is going to be a guy who I actually don't like to say that I'm down on because of how consistent he's been, but because there's also another really consistent guy that you can get significantly later, I am passing on Nick Chubb at 39 overall and buying in on Josh Jacobs at 67. Josh Jacobs is a guy who we've both been screaming, underrated as all hell. The guy's what, 24, I think, right?
24.
God, I just have to check every time because I'm like, I have to be wrong about that, right? Like, the community can't be that down on a 24-year-old guy who has only finished in the top 10. And I mean, on a points per game basis, always top 10, right? Or top 12. And I mean, the only time he finished outside of the top 12 overall was his rookie year when he missed 3 games, right? I mean, the guy, we see the news, the Raiders aren't necessarily actively shopping this guy, but he's just like the king of consistency. I think this offense gets a bump up in touchdown production this year with Davante Adams. So I think his opportunities at the goal line are going to go up when he's clearly been their goal line guy for the last 3 years. We've seen 9 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns, and 7 touchdowns going back to 2019. I mean, the guy is a very good football player. A very good football player who entered the league very young, came in very, very established, very polished runner. Right, he's been relied on by Vegas for as long as he's been in the league, right, since 2019. He has been their workhorse guy, right? He's been their bell cow. Coming out of Bama, the guy is the definition of a workhorse back in any sense of the word. He's not necessarily going to go off and win you the week, but he's going to make you feel really safe heading into each and every week with whoever your opponent is putting against him. And you're drafting him at an RB2 price to be able to draft a 24-year-old that's only been an RB1 his entire career as an RB2 at 67 overall. I'm taking that every time over the guy Nick Chubb, who we think that offense is going to start leaning more pass heavy when Deshaun Watson shows up. He does have the Kareem Hunt competition and just a more expensive price, right? I view these guys, it's kind of similar to the Dobbins and Mitchell situation from before, right? I just view them really similarly, and there's a huge disparity in their price, going from 39 to 67.
Yeah, we're still batting at 1,000 here, buddy. I completely agree with you. This is such a good take that it hurts me, right? Getting Josh Jacobs 30 picks after Nick Chubb is unreal, right? He's, like you mentioned, he's only 24 versus Nick Chubb being 26. He catches more balls than him. The efficiency, while Nick Chubb is really good at what he does, you see just as much of it out of Josh Jacobs, right? So Nick Chubb, the last 4 years, he's finished in PPR leagues, 194 points, 252 points, give him props there, 206 points, 213 points. That's a 4-year career. Josh Jacobs, 190 points. He only had 4 less points than Nick Chubb as rookies, right? Second year, he had 229. Third year, he had 224. So out of Nick Chubb's 4 seasons, he's he has the highest PPR total out of those two, but Josh Jacobs has the second and third finish out of those guys. Very, very similar production in the grand scheme of things, right? Nick Chubb, he's going to go out there. He had almost 1,500 yards a few years ago. Last year, he had over 1,250 yards. Josh Jacobs, we saw him take a step back last year, right? He only had 870 yards, still had 9 touchdowns, and that was only on 217 carries. The caveat with Josh Jacobs last year and moving forward is that he got 64 targets. That is like the opposite trend of what Nick Chubb is doing, right? So Nick Chubb's first 2 years, he had 29 targets and 49 targets. Then Kareem Hunt came to town, 18 targets in 12 games, 25 targets in 14 games. Nick Chubb does not catch the ball, which means that you need him to go off for 100 yards and a touchdown if you want him to be relevant. Consequently, we were saying that same thing about Josh Jacobs this time last year, but now he's proven us that he can be an asset in the passing game. So I think that in the grand scheme of things, you do have more winning weeks from Nick Chubb. And I don't think either one of us could really argue that. Nick Chubb can win you a week. Josh Jacobs, he's just going to kind of get by as your RB2. But he's 30 spots cheaper and 2 years younger. And on top of it, if he doesn't re-sign with the Raiders, he's going to go somewhere and he's going to produce just as much as always. There's always RB needy teams in the offseason. And at the age of 24, Josh Jacobs is not going to have a hard time finding a starting job somewhere. So a 30-pick disparity, 1-for-1, yes, probably Nick Chubb over Josh Jacobs just because of that week winning upside. But a 30-pick disparity, I'm going Josh Jacobs every time.
I think the one thing that I will say I kind of am about to hold against Josh Jacobs is just that Josh McDaniels just came to town, and we know what the Patriots' backfield has been every single year when he was running that offense. So it wouldn't surprise me if they had a specialist to be there on third downs, on the passing downs, and to catch those balls. But I think that he's going to be the specialist on the goal line. So that's what makes him just a really safe pick. And what I think is going to be a pretty good offense with Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, and Josh McDaniels leading the way there. So yeah, I do like it, but I do have to. I think I would pump the brakes on getting my hopes up on the receiving end.
Well, then to
counter the counter.
Counter your counter. If McDaniels is going to come in and make this like the Patriots offense, Damian Harris had 15 touchdowns last year as the goal line back. There you go. That makes up for the receiving drop off that Josh Jacobs could potentially see this year, right? 15 touchdowns. Don't know if that's going to happen, but would be pretty damn cool. I cannot talk right now.
Would it shock you though? It wouldn't really shock me if he had 15 touchdowns, right? 15 touches from the 2-3 yard line that he snuck in there. That wouldn't shock me at all for Josh.
That's the thing. It wouldn't shock me either. And I've said this a ton of times on this channel. Josh Jacobs, there is a very good possibility that Vegas just asks him to do everything this year. There's coach speak. There's coach speak all the time. McDaniels is out here saying Amir Abdullah is going to be the new James White for Vegas or whatever. But if they know Jacobs is not going to be re-signing in Vegas, if they have no plans to re-sign him, why not give him 300 touches? Why not give him 60 fucking targets again? There's no reason not to, because it's not your investment. Who cares? Run him into the ground this year and let the next team deal with his wear and tear. So I don't know. It's very possible to see an absolute massive year from Josh Jacobs. I'm personally counting on that, but yeah, that's just me. I'll move on here. I'll go ahead and give my third this, not that. So moving over to wide receivers, or I should say I'm sticking with wide receivers. I am taking my boy Chris Godwin at 68 instead of Diontae Johnson at 52. And Tyler, I know you're a big Diontae Johnson fan. I know a lot of people watching this are big Diontae Johnson fans, but I don't know how anyone could argue Diontae at 52 over Chris Godwin at 68. Deontay's coming off of a massive year, right? He had a top 10 season last year. It was amazing to watch. And that was with Ben Roethlisberger playing one of the worst years of his career. But now Diontae Johnson, he has, Chase Claypool's obviously there. That's going to limit his red zone upside. Pat Freiermuth is there. That limits his red zone upside. And George Pickens is there, who just had an amazing first preseason game and is arguably the most hyped wide receiver on Twitter right now. It's actually insane. If you have George Pickens, flip him immediately. He's going to be good, but he is worth way too much right now not to sell him. It's unreal. But anyway, Diontae Johnson just got extended with the Steelers. We know he's going to be there for the next 3 seasons now. And I really don't have a lot of faith in this team at the moment. Mitch Trubisky sucks. Kenny Pickett's got a long way to go before he's a legitimate starter. And Mason Rudolph is Mason Rudolph. So I don't love the situation that he's in. I don't love the situation that he's going to be in for the next 3 years. I think last year was definitely his ceiling. I can't imagine another year where he puts up that big stat line, that many catches. There's just too much going on in Pittsburgh right now, and there's not enough going on at the quarterback position for them. Now, when we look at Chris Godwin, yeah, he'll probably lose Tom Brady in the next year or two, which sucks. But Godwin is a better talent than Diontae Johnson, and anyone who says otherwise, I will fight you. But Godwin, he's like 2 or 3 seasons removed from the wide receiver 2 overall finish. The only person he finished behind was Michael Thomas when Michael Thomas had that big, insane year. 2 years ago, Chris Godwin was, I believe, the wide receiver 14 or 15 overall, or no, it was like the wide receiver 6 or 7. And then last year he finished as the wide receiver 15 or 16 overall. But that was with him missing the last handful of games. And when he went down, he was the wide receiver 5 or 6 on the season at that point. Godwin is just hyper targeted by Tom Brady. Obviously, Mike Evans is the big red zone guy there. We're not drafting Chris Godwin to get in the end zone. We're drafting Chris Godwin because he catches a shit ton of balls and he's going to get an absolute fuck ton of yards between the 20s. And that's just what it is. You take Rob Gronkowski out of the equation. That's one less guy that eats up the middle of the field. Chris Godwin's going to eat that up. And then, you could argue they brought in Russell Gage and Julio Jones. But both of those guys are just compliments for Godwin, right? Like I said, Godwin, we're not drafting him to get 8+ touchdowns. As long as he has 6 touchdowns on the year, I don't think anyone can complain. There's just way too much upside. He is when he's on the field, at the very worst, he's like the wide receiver 6 or 7 in the entire league. And the fact that you can get him at 68 overall is just stupid. Injury be damned. Even if he misses the first 1 to 3 weeks of the season, not the least bit worried. Chris Godwin is one of the best values in all of Dynasty right now.
So for one, I just have to say that I'm shocked that you are willing to use violence to die on your hill for Chris Godwin. I don't know you as a violent guy. But it's funny that you bring him up because, you've been clamoring for him all season. And as I'm looking at our rankings right now, I actually have him higher than you do. I have him as my wide receiver 9. You have him as wide receiver 13. He's our consensus 11. And then I also do have him significantly over Diontae. Diontae is my wide receiver 16. So we're pretty close in those regards. Everything you said, right? Listen, Tom Brady might be going, but guess what? He just put up the most fantasy points per game for his receivers by a wide margin, like not even close, like 6 points per game over the next best in Justin Herbert, right? If I'm drafting Chris Godwin, I could not care any less about what the situation is going to be like 3 years from now because I'm just banking on the fact that he's going to crush it for the next year or two while Tom Brady's there, right? And even after Brady, we saw him produce with Jameis Winston, right?
That was his big year, right? When he was the wide receiver 2 overall, it was with Jameis.
Yeah, right. And it's probably really not a coincidence, right? Jameis Winston is a fantasy production monster, I guess you could call him for his receivers, right? Not the most fun guy to have on your NFL roster. But if you're gonna tell me I'm gonna get a slice of Tom Brady's offense, would you say he was going at 60 or something like that?
Godwin is 68, Diontae Johnson 52.
Yeah, that's wild. For me and you to both have him in our top 15 receivers, and for him to be going that late, I'm all for it. We've been talking about it all off season. You can probably find more information on Chris Godwin if you clicked on any video that has mine and Mikey's names on it. So I'll quit beating the drum on that one. But yeah, Chris Godwin all day long at every value. There's almost never a draft where I don't like when someone decides to take him this this year.
Yeah. Godwin's ADP needs to be significantly higher than 68. Honestly, Diontae Johnson at 52 probably sounds about right. Chris Godwin should be being drafted before Diontae. I think in any single format. So that's just my take on it. I think you'd agree with that, but I'll let you go ahead and give your fourth situation here.
So my fourth one, we're going to stick with some receivers here. And this guy, unfortunately, I own a lot of shares of because I can't get rid of him. But I'm passing on Tyreek at 37 because I can get Mike Evans at 60. Guys could not be any more different as football players. In terms of fantasy production, they're also quite different as well. Mike Evans is just a really consistent guy. He has been his entire career. He is the king of consistency at the receiver position. And for a lot of the reasons we just talked about Chris Godwin, right? Vacated targets, where they're in a high-powered offense. It's going to score a lot, right? For all those same reasons, I love Mike Evans at 60. And on the contrary, I don't like a lot of things about Tyreek's situation. He's competing with one of the best young receivers in the league right now, with a quarterback who needs a lot of development and who has been really, really raw and not been in the best spot with not the best offensive line, not the best offense. Not a lot to love about Tyreek going from Kansas City to Miami, and a lot to love about Mike Evans' situation with Gronk and AB out of the picture. So yeah, I mean, give me the consistency. Like when you draft Tyreek, you're kind of hoping that he's going to remain a top 10 receiver in that offense, right? I think we're kind of locked in on that with Mike Evans. I don't have nearly as many questions with Mike Evans. Get him 23 picks later. Yeah, send him my way. Put him on my roster.
Yeah, I agree with you. Somehow we are 7 situations in, and you and I are agreeing on everything. This is kind of scary. This never happens. But yeah, dude, the fact that you can get Mike Evans 2 whole rounds after Tyreek Hill is ridiculous, right? Tyreek Hill offers week winning upside, but so does Mike Evans. I mean, Mike Evans has 27 touchdowns over the last 2 years. His receiving yards have gone down since Chris Godwin has been in Tampa Bay and since Tom Brady has been in Tampa Bay, but his touchdowns are way up, right? And now that Gronk isn't there anymore, there's no reason to believe that Mike Evans can't see another 13 or 14 touchdowns this year like he has the last 2 seasons. So I really love this take. I think both of them have week winning upside, and I think Mike Evans is going to be more consistent for you along the way. Getting him 2 rounds later, they're the same exact age, by the way. They're both only 28 years old, so it doesn't make sense that they're so far apart. And while I personally do have Tyreek Hill ranked a bit higher than Mike Evans in my Dynasty rankings, the more I think about how low I have Mike Evans, the more I think that it's a mistake, because we've been doing this for the last several years as a collective, community. Everyone does not value Mike Evans nearly high enough. He's a Hall of Fame wide receiver, right? Like, he has set record after record with his 1,000-yard seasons, with his touchdown upside. Like, he is insane. He's had 7 or 8 seasons in a row of 1,000+ yards. Like, who does that? And he's not gonna slow down, especially since he still has Tom Brady for the next year or two. So yeah, pick 60. I would take Mike Evans 100 times out of 100 times over Tyreek Hill at 37.
Yeah, it's just everything about the situation, right? Everything to love about Mike Evans and almost nothing to love about Tyreek, and they're both just highly elite level athletes in the NFL. So I'll take the guy in the good spot.
Definitely. So I'm going to move on to my fourth, my second to last one here. Talk about some tight ends. And I wasn't really planning on talking about too many tight ends in this video, but this one seems right, and I'm sure you'll have something to say about it. But I'm drafting Dallas Goedert at pick 90, and I'm ignoring Dalton Schultz at pick 76. It's a 14 pick difference over a full round. They're pretty similar, except Dallas Goedert has shown us more, right? Like we've only seen one season, one legitimate season out of Dalton Schultz. Sure, Dalton Schultz is a year younger, but he also doesn't have a contract, and Goddard does. Schultz is currently going to be playing on the franchise tag. We don't know if he's going to get extended in Dallas. And best case scenario for him is that he gets extended in Dallas, right? There are not many other situations. There might not be a single other situation that I would rather see him in than in Dallas. And that could change as early as the 2023 season. So it's very possible that we see Schultz's situation change drastically over the next, 12 months or so. So that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of fading Schultz there. Again, we've only seen him do it for one season. And there is going to be a lot of opportunity in Dallas this year, right? With Amari Cooper gone, with Michael Gallup injured, Dalton Schultz is going to factor in as Dak Prescott's number 2 target pretty early on in the season. I don't think anyone can really argue against that. But we're still just banking on a lot, and I think that him and Dallas Goedert have very similar upside. So getting into Dallas Goedert a bit, I know I just got done saying the Eagles' offense is insanely crowded. That's not necessarily a bad thing for the tight ends, especially for Dallas Goedert, right? So Goedert is a very talented tight end. He's already a top 10 talent in the NFL at that position. He's been very consistent. He had a top 5 tight end finish just a couple of years ago, and Zach Ertz was also in the top 5. So we've seen him split reps and do perfectly fine. Now he has the offense all to himself. The only knock that I have on Goedert is that his touchdown upside could be a little limited now that A.J. Brown is going to be there. I think him and A.J. Brown are kind of going to duke it out for those red zone targets. But that's the only drawback, right? Like I would rather have Goedert from a dynasty perspective in a 1-over-1 than Dalton Schultz, and you're getting him 14 picks later. So there's nothing wrong with Dalton Schultz at 76, but I think Dallas Goedert at 90 is just so much better. And we know the situation, right? Like the thing that really makes me nervous with Schultz is that we've only seen one season out of him, and he very well could be out of Dallas this time next year.
And I like the fact that you brought that up, right? Because I know just on the last one, right, we were just talking about, I was just saying that I'll take Mike Evans because of his situation, right? But when it comes to this one, the fact that this situation could change makes a big difference, right? Like you said, Dalton Schultz could be out of there really soon, and there's not a place I would really rather see him than Dallas. My only reservations is that we haven't seen Dalton Schultz put up a true elite top 5 tight end season, a true complete season, where we did just see Dalton Schultz put up an elite season, right? And even if I'm only going to have that top 5 production for another year or two, I think I might rather have that than the 4 or 5 years that we're going to see out of Dalton Schultz as probably a low end tight end 1. The upside might just be a little bit too much for me on Dalton Schultz to pass up on him, especially with the vacated targets. But I am willing to admit that the situation might change, and the minute that it does, there's not going to be any reason to take Dalton Schultz over Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, it's tough. Last year we didn't see exactly what we wanted to see out of Dallas Goedert, but he was still a top 11 PPR guy. Dalton Schultz was number 3 overall, which is why his ADP is higher than Goedert. And I have to correct myself. I said a couple years ago Goedert was a top 5 guy. He was a top 10 guy, so apologize for that. But I think they have similar upside. I really do, even in this year. Schultz is, if I'm in a redraft league, I'm going to go with Schultz over Goedert, I think, because, there's a bigger upside for target. But there's definitely a world where Goedert has the same ceiling this year. And I think in years to come, I think Goedert will be the guy. So I don't know. It's pretty close. It's pretty close for me. Like if these two were at the exact same ADP, if one of them was 89 and the other one was 90, then maybe I would risk it with Schultz. But the way I look at it, if I can get the safer situation and similar upside in Goedert 14 picks later, that's just where I'm coming from with that one.
Yeah, definitely. And they are back to back in my rankings too. I have Schultz at 9 and Goedert at 8. So in terms of that, like explanation, yes, at that price, at a round later, I'm probably going to go with Goddard. But yeah, the upside is just really there for me with Schultz. But so now I'll move on to this one. My last and final one is going to be some quarterbacks. I'm gonna, even though I like drafting Matthew Stafford at 32 over a lot of the other quarterbacks in the first round, like we kind of talked about earlier. I'm actually going to talk about passing on Matthew Stafford for a guy who I don't think gets talked about enough. Aaron Rodgers at 48. Yes, I know he lost Devontae. He's going to make it work. He is Aaron freaking Rodgers, and he is going to make the Green Bay Packers an elite football team, just like he has done every single year in his career since he took over for Brett Favre. Yes, there's some uncertainty, and he doesn't plan on playing for longer than another 3 years probably. But in those 3 years, he's going to be a top 5 quarterback in the league, in fantasy production and in real life. So while Matt Stafford is also getting an improvement, couldn't find that word, that 6th grade vocabulary word of improvement. But yeah, even though Matthew Stafford's getting an improvement in his situation with Allen Robinson coming to town, and I mean, I think they're just two really similar guys, right? That we've seen like play each other throughout their careers. Aaron Rodgers has a very similar, head coach to Matt Stafford. They're both in very good offenses. Matt Stafford might have a lot more weapons, but Aaron Rodgers is going to do just as much with a lot less than Matthew Stafford.
So it took the entire video, but we finally disagree on something. I knew there was going to be one. There had to be one. I don't disagree to an extent where I would die on a hill, but I think I would take Matt Stafford at 32 versus Aaron Rodgers at 48. And here's just where I'm coming from with this one. So Stafford has always been a really good quarterback for fantasy. Aaron Rodgers has always been a great quarterback for fantasy, especially over the last 3 or 4 years. Coincidentally, that's when Davante Adams was playing his best ball. Matt Stafford, coincidentally, gets out of Detroit. He puts up a top 5 season, and he had plenty of top 10 seasons in Detroit, especially when Calvin Johnson was there, obviously. But the big thing here is the loss of Davante Adams and the age difference. Those are my 2 big things. Matt Stafford finished just barely ahead of Aaron Rodgers last year, and that's enough for me to make a solid argument right here, is that Matt Stafford outproduced Aaron Rodgers last year for fantasy. Granted, Cooper Kupp was having an insane season, but he only had Robert Woods for about 7 or 8 games. Then he transitioned to OBJ. Didn't have Cam Akers, his starting running back or anything like that. Darrell Henderson was kind of injured in and out. The Rams are fully healthy. The sky's the limit for Matt Stafford, and he could be one of the highest upside quarterbacks in the entire league for fantasy this year. Aaron Rodgers is kind of the opposite, right? Like we're hoping that he can stay a top 10 quarterback. I don't even think anyone is holding their breath that he can stay a top 5 guy, because going from Davante Adams as your wide receiver 1 to either Allen Lazard or training camp extraordinaire Romeo Doubs, I don't love it. So I would say that Matt Stafford has a better immediate upside than Aaron Rodgers, and Rodgers very well could retire after this year. Rodgers could hang him up at the conclusion of the 2022 season. I know he's been extended for 2 or 3 years, but he can still retire in the middle of it. Where Matt Stafford, he still has at least another 4 years to go. So I'm fine with the 16 pick discrepancy to go with Stafford in dynasty formats. If we're talking redraft, then yeah, I would go Rodgers 16 picks later, I think. But for dynasty, for the longevity wise, I got to go with Stafford, especially with, he's got Allen Robinson for the next 3 years. He's got Cooper Kupp for the next 4 or 5 years. This is just a really good team, the Rams are, and I think Stafford's going to keep balling out with them.
And like I kind of preface with, right, like I actually do really kind of like Stafford's price. I just also do really like Aaron Rodgers. As you were kind of talking about it, I think a better example probably would have been passing on Russell Wilson at 21 and going with Aaron Rodgers at whatever he was, 48. But I already spoke, and I mean what I say. I'm a man of my word. So
no, it's not like I said, it's not something I would die on a hill for. I can totally see why you would think that Aaron Rodgers is a better value at 48 versus Matt Stafford at 32. It's not the play that I'm making personally, but I also just needed any excuse to disagree with you because we cannot go perfect in a video, and I have a feeling you're going to agree with me on my last one, so I needed to make sure I pointed it out. But just like you, I'm also a man of my word. Meant what I said. I would take Stafford at 32 versus Rodgers at 48.
Well, I can't wait to force myself to disagree with you here.
I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can. Well, you might be able to. But it's running backs. I haven't talked about any running backs yet. And they're kind of, our back end RB2, maybe high end RB3s. But I'm drafting Chase Edmonds at 125 and leaving Miles Sanders on the board at 97. So before I get into it, how do you feel about that?
I love it actually. Miles Sanders has regressed every year since he's gotten in the NFL. So I'm really not interested in having him on any of my rosters compared to the upside that we have with Chase Edmonds at 120 something. You know what I mean? Edmonds is a really efficient guy, and he's one of the first chances he's going to have as a lead back in Miami. Granted, Miami has a terrible offensive line, and they're really not the greatest football team. They are on the up. Not great yet. I think they're still a young team and still have some ways to go. But yeah, I hate you, but I agree with you.
See, I had a feeling you would agree. But we went 9 out of 10 this video, right? So pretty good. Not bad for us. But yeah, I'm taking Chase Edmonds at 125. I'm leaving Sanders there at 97. Reason why I'm not taking Sanders at 97, it's this offense, man. It's such a crowded offense, from the receivers to the quarterback taking rushing opportunities to Miles Sanders not having touchdowns anymore, right? And I'm a big believer in Kenny Gainwell. The Eagles are big believers in Boston Scott. Miles Sanders seems to find himself in the doghouse constantly. It just kind of seems like everything's working against him. Now, granted, he is the quote-unquote lead back in a three-headed monster of a backfield, but so is Chase Edmonds. And that's kind of why I picked these two, because they're in very similar situations. Granted, Miles Sanders does have a better offensive line, but Miles Sanders is also playing in a contract year where Chase Edmonds is kind of solidified in his situation for the next 2 or 3 seasons. Chase Edmonds is only 1 year older than Miles Sanders. He's 26. Sanders is 25. But if I'm going to own any back in Philly at cost, it's going to be Kenny Gainwell. Where in Miami, if I'm going to own any back at cost, it's going to be Chase Edmonds because of the pure amount of upside. Sanders doesn't have the PPR upside. Edmonds does. I would say Sanders is probably going to be, obviously, a bit more rushing yards than Chase Edmonds, but I don't think it's going to be by a landslide. With Edmonds, he's not going to have goal line carries, right? That's going to be Sony Michel. Raheem Mostert is going to step in here and there, but if there's anything we know about Raheem Mostert, it's he's made of glass and he'll play 3 games as always. But Chase Edmonds, he's going to be on the field for virtually every single third down. He is going to be on the field for a lot of option plays out there because I think him and Tua are going to be a really good 1-2 punch with that. He's going to be the go-to screen guy out of all those running backs. I know you can make an argument that it'd be Raheem Mostert since he's so damn fast, but Chase Edmonds, he's by far the best catcher, the best pass catcher in that backfield. And even though he doesn't have the speed that Mostert does, Edmonds is actually quietly pretty shifty. What you're really going to want on those dink and dunk passes there. I just think that, we've seen back end RB2 seasons out of Edmonds or high end RB3 seasons since he's entered the league. And he's always been behind someone really good, right? Like he was behind David Johnson. He was behind Kenyon Drake. He was behind James Conner. This is the first time where Chase Edmonds is in the front of the line. And if his floor, right, if his floor is what we saw in Arizona, where he's a back end RB2, why wouldn't you take that at 125, right? Like if you're getting yourself a top 25 running back at pick 125 with the upside, especially in PPR leagues, to potentially be a top 15, top 18 guy in a really good offense, why not, right? Like I'm taking that every day of the week over Miles Sanders 30 picks later.
Yeah, and I mean, when we look at Miles Sanders, right, there's almost nothing to like about just the way he's trended, right? He's seen a reduction in rushing attempts each and every year since he's gotten in the league, targets in the air. I mean, you look at his receiving profile from his rookie year, right? You have 63 targets for 50 catches, 500 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's averaging 10 yards a catch. The very next year, he only lost 10 targets. He more than cut his yards in half. He went from 509 yards to 197. And the following year, he went from 52 targets that year to 34. There's nothing to like about it, going from 500 yards to 200 yards to 160, to go from 180 touches to 160 to 140. Like, he's trending down, right? And it doesn't matter that that Chase Edmonds, he's a year older, right?
Yes.
Just a year older, right? Doesn't matter that he's a year older. If he's going to be the one producing, it does not matter whatsoever. If Miles Sanders is just a garbage piece on your roster that doesn't score touchdowns, doesn't catch passes, doesn't win you games or even really keep you in games, like, you're lucky if he puts up a 10 or 12-point week and matches what your opponent's RB2 is doing. Yeah, I hate Miles Sanders, and I love everything about Chase Edmonds' situation. I don't hate Miles Sanders as a human being. He's probably a nice guy. Never met him. Can't really speak on it. But hate his football situation.
Yeah, and I don't really think I can add any more to that, right? Everything that you said, you kind of added in anything that I might have left out there. And again, it's just the efficiency thing. Nick Sirianni is not friendly to Miles Sanders in this offense. I mean, Miles Sanders went the entire year last year, 12 games, 0 touchdowns, no rushing touchdowns, no receiving touchdowns, just straight up 0 touchdowns. Obviously, I do expect him to have at least, 3 to 5 touchdowns this year to some capacity, but it's a 3-headed workload back there. And I think Kenny Gainwell is going to trend up, and Miles Sanders is probably going to trend to be about the same where he has been. So hopefully, if you are in a dynasty league that had started in 2019 or earlier, and you had Miles Sanders, hopefully you sold very high after his rookie year, after he was a top 14 running back his rookie year. That was pretty awesome. That was a great time to sell. Hindsight's 2020. I don't remember if I was selling him or not after 2019. I kind of feel like I was, but I also might just be talking on my ass to make myself sound better. So I don't really know. But that's going to be it for us here today on that Dynasty show. We each went through 5 things there, and honestly, this is really interesting to look at, right? I was kind of saying it at the beginning of the video. You never want to fall victim to the ADP. You always want to be thinking ahead, right? Don't go for a guy like Miles Sanders just because you're on the board at 102 and it said he was supposed to go at 97, and you're like, oh man, that's a value. Like, that's a terrible way to draft. Get your guys like at 102. I'm not reaching on Chase Edmonds since he does have an ADP at 125. There's probably a better guy that I can get there. But it's nice knowing that you can look at the board and say, okay, you know what? I'm up again in 12 picks. I'll be there at 116. Chase Edmonds is projected to go at 125. Maybe I reach around to get a guy like that if I wanted Miles Sanders here or something of that capacity. So the lesson here is to just always be looking ahead on your draft board, because the ADP only tells some of the story.
Yeah, and this is like some of the most important concepts in Dynasty, right? Is like, would you rather have this player or that player? It's like, well, it depends at what price, right? It's like, if you go back and look at these players that we were talking about, right, in terms of value, every single one. If you sent me the trade offer today, here, you can have Cooper Kupp, I'll take Stefon Diggs. I mean, obviously, I'm going to accept, right? But when we're talking about at cost, right? We're talking about when are we finding values on these guys, and who are we really avoiding and feeling like we're overpaying for, and to a point where we're just not comfortable, right? And who are we feeling lucky and excited about drafting when we get them? It's definitely one of the most important concepts, and something that every successful league manager has to think about and take into consideration for sure.
Exactly. So always be paying attention, always be looking ahead. And, you always want to get your guys, but you also got to remember, don't reach too much, don't go taking Chase Edmonds at 97 just because that's just way too early.
Just because Mikey said so, right? Just because Mikey said so.
Exactly. But similarly, don't go taking Stefon Diggs at number 13 overall if you like him over Cooper Kupp, right? There's limits to what we're looking at here, but it's always good to just kind of keep those things in your mind. But like I said, that's going to do it for us here on that Dynasty show today. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure you are liking if you like the video, comment if you got something to say, join the Discord if you'd like. Yeah, definitely hit that subscribe button if you have not already done it and you want to see more of our faces or hear more of our voices. Shout out to our buddy Vin, actually. He tells me that he listens. I don't think he watches, but he drives a lot for work and he listens to every single episode in his car. So, Vin, if you made it this far in this episode, shout out to you, buddy. Thanks for listening to every single episode that we've put out so far.
Yeah, thanks, Vin, and thanks everyone. Right. Catch you guys next time.